9:41 a.m. Pacific Ocean, 340 miles southwest of San Diego. A Coast Guard MH-65 Dolphin finished a routine arc over empty water. Nothing on radar, no vessel traffic, no distress signals. The pilot logged the coordinates and turned northeast toward home. But the water behind him told a different story. A wake, moving southeast at 6 knots. No hull above the surface. No superstructure. No navigation lights. Just a line of disturbed ocean trailing something that, by every instrument reading, did not exist. The pilot noted it in his report. One line. Then he went home. What was running 6 feet below that waterline? 340 vacuum-sealed bricks of crystal methamphetamine, 11.2 tons. A purpose-built narco semi-submersible, fiberglass hull, painted the exact gray-green of the Pacific at depth. 8 crew members who had been at sea for 14 days. And a satellite uplink hidden inside a sport fishing transponder shell, pinging a relay station somewhere off the Baja coast. The vessel had almost made it. 340 miles of open ocean, 14 days of running dark, a $1.2 million custom-built hull designed to beat every radar system in the Pacific interdiction net. It came down to one notation in one pilot's logbook, and a CBP analyst who happened to pull that file 4 days later. This is how 11.2 tons of methamphetamine almost crossed the Pacific, and how a ghost wake gave it away. The Drug Enforcement Administration's Special Operations Division had been tracking a maritime corridor since October 2025. Not a specific vessel, a pattern. A 9-month intelligence picture built from signal intercepts, informant reports, and a partnership with the Maritime Analysis and Operations Center Narcotics, the joint EU-US Maritime Intel Cell operating out of Lisbon. The corridor ran southwest from the Baja Peninsula, arcing through international waters before turning north toward entry points along the Southern California coast. MAMOC-N flagged it first, in a briefing dated November 4, 2025, a suspected cartel logistics route, probably supporting semi-submersible or low-profile vessel traffic, carrying finished product rather than precursors. The cartel behind it called the operation Ruta Azul, Blue Route. The name appeared once in intercepted radio traffic, then never again, but it stayed in the SOD case file. What the task force didn't have, through 9 months of mapping, was a vessel. They had a corridor. They had timing windows, they had a general profile, low profile, likely semi-submersible, probably departing from a coastal staging point on the Baja Peninsula, probably running a 12 to 16-day transit cycle. But no specific hull, no confirmed departure date, no fix on the actual vessel. That changed because of a 40-second radar anomaly and a CBP analyst named Reyes who worked late on a Tuesday. Marcus Reyes worked for CBP's Air and Marine Operations Center in San Diego. His job was pattern analysis, reviewing flight logs, radar tracks, and sensor data from AMO aircraft operating over the Eastern Pacific. Most of what he reviewed was routine, fishing vessels, legitimate commercial traffic, the occasional pleasure craft running too far offshore. On February 3, 2026, 4 days after the MH-65 pilot logged his wake anomaly, Reyes pulled the track during a routine data sweep. The pilot's notation had been flagged by an automated system. Wake signature without a corresponding vessel return. Low priority. The kind of flag that stacked up by the dozens every week and almost never led anywhere. Reyes looked at it anyway. The wake signature ran southeast. Consistent speed, 6 knots. Duration of contact, approximately 40 seconds before the helicopter turned. Not enough for a lock, but enough for a track vector. Reyes pulled the coordinates into his mapping system and ran a backward projection. Where would that heading have originated, assuming consistent speed and course over the prior 72 hours? The projection pointed to a departure zone along the northern Baja coast, timing consistent with a departure around January 30. Then Reyes did something that mattered. He searched the archive. One detail kept standing out in the case file. A wake anomaly logged on March 7, 2025, by a different aircraft on a different patrol. Same general corridor, same heading, same approximate speed, no vessel return, 2 data points, 10 months apart. Same vector, same depth profile. Going through the archive sensor logs, here is what the data showed. This was not a one-time anomaly. This was a cycle. Reyes flagged it to his supervisor, who escalated it to the DEA Joint Task Force the same afternoon. By February 5, 2026, the report was on the desk of the SOD coordinator handling the Ruta Azul file. The task force now had a corridor, a timing cycle, and 2 confirmed wake signatures. What they needed was a P-3 Orion. The Lockheed P-3 Orion is a maritime patrol aircraft, 4 turboprops, endurance of 12 to 17 hours depending on fuel load. Equipped with surface search radar, magnetic anomaly detection, and acoustic sensor systems designed originally to hunt submarines during the Cold War. The Navy still operates them for drug interdiction, forward deployed through the Joint Interagency Task Force South, which coordinates maritime counterdrug operations across the Pacific and Caribbean. A P-3 out of Naval Air Station Corpus Christi was assigned to the Ruta Azul task force on February 10, 2026. The crew flew their first patrol on February 14, covering the projected corridor based on the timing cycle Reyes had identified. Nothing. The second patrol, February 21. Nothing. The third, February 28. A faint MAD return, inconclusive, at the northern edge of the corridor. At the dispatch center, analysts work the radar tracking display, adjusting the transit model. Suffer influx rating closer to 16 days than 12. The next contact window would fall in the first week of July. The surveillance monitor wall stays live. They planned around July 9. At the dispatch center, analysts pull the archived radar tracking display data, a low-priority flag from 10 months earlier, now cross-referenced against the current contact. On the surveillance monitor wall, an agent circles a wake anomaly logged by a pilot who chose to write it down. Drone surveillance footage from that earlier transit sits in the queue. Each of those steps, captured on camera, on screen, remove any one of them, and the vessel completes its run. The vessel itself was a significant engineering project. Post-seizure analysis, conducted by DEA and Coast Guard technical teams in San Diego, would later reconstruct its specifications. Length approximately 74 feet, beam 8 feet. Fiberglass hull, multi-layer construction, with a foam core to reduce acoustic signature. Running depth 4 to 8 feet below the waterline, with a small air intake tube extending above the surface for the diesel engine. The hull was painted in a custom gray-green formula matched to Pacific Ocean color at depth under overcast skies. The satellite uplink was the most sophisticated piece of the build. Housed inside a commercial sport fishing vessel transponder, it transmitted on a frequency pattern designed to mimic legitimate maritime traffic. Burst transmissions. Short duration. Time to fall in the gaps between satellite overhead passes. Whoever designed the communications package understood the monitoring environment. Federal agents hauling evidence bags from the vessel documented the scale of what was built beneath the waterline: a sealed cargo hold, a custom exhaust scrubber, a reinforced keel. DEA Special Operations investigators on scene estimated the fabrication cost at $1.2 million. For 11.2 tons of crystal methamphetamine, the margin justified every dollar. DEA Special Operations agents secure the vessel at the waterline. A courier arrest plays out on the dock, suspect on the ground, federal agents kneeling over him, body camera footage rolling. The operation is not finished. By late June 2026, the task force had its assets in place. The P-3 was scheduled for an extended patrol beginning July 7. A Coast Guard Sentinel-class cutter, USCGC Steadfast, was repositioned to a holding point 200 miles southwest of San Diego. A DEA Foreign Deployed Advisory and Support Team, FAST, was staged at Naval Air Station North Island, ready to deploy by helicopter if the P-3 got a positive contact. Then, at 11:30 p.m. on July 8, the task force hit its first obstacle. The P-3 crew reported a mechanical issue with the surface search radar. Primary system down. Backup available but with reduced range. The patrol could continue, but detection capability was degraded. Task force commanders had a decision: scrub the July 9 window and reset for a later date, or continue with degraded sensors. Think about that for a second. 9 months of work, assets positioned, a timing window that won't repeat for another 10 days minimum. And your primary detection system is offline. The task force commander kept the patrol active. The P-3 flew on backup radar, supplemented by the magnetic anomaly detection system. If the vessel was running at depth, MAD might catch it even where radar couldn't. July 9, 2026, 07:23 a.m. The P-3 was 340 miles southwest of San Diego, at the northern edge of the projected corridor. The backup radar showed nothing. Then the MAD operator reported a contact, faint, brief, consistent with a large ferrous mass moving below the surface at the corridor's centerline. Not conclusive, but enough. The P-3 circled, dropped a pattern of sonobuoys. The acoustic return from the second buoy showed a diesel engine signature, low power, consistent with a semi-submersible running at reduced speed. At 07:47 a.m., the task force coordinator transmitted to USCGC Steadfast, execute intercept. Grid follows. The cutter was 90 miles from the contact point, approximately 90 minutes at flank speed. The DEA FAST team lifted from North Island at 08:15, two MH-60 Jayhawk helicopters carrying 8 operators and equipment. They would reach the contact point ahead of the cutter. Here is what nobody expected about what happened next. The semi-submersible crew knew something was wrong before the helicopters arrived. The satellite uplink logged 2 burst transmissions at 08:02 and 08:09 a.m. Short, encrypted. The task force signals team intercepted both but couldn't decrypt them in real time. Post-seizure analysis later confirmed they were distress signals to a shore-based relay point on the Baja Peninsula. The crew was alerting their handlers. But there was nowhere to go. At 08:34 a.m., the first MH-60 reached the contact point. The pilot dropped to 50 feet. Visible below the faint outline of the hull running just below the surface, the air intake tube extending above the waterline, a small rooster tail of wake behind the stern. The co-pilot confirmed over radio. We have visual, semi-sub, running, one intake visible. No deck personnel observed. The second helicopter positioned on the opposite side. Standard interdiction formation. The FAST team leader transmitted a command on the maritime distress frequency and on the frequency band used by the vessel's transponder system, surface immediately or prepare for boarding. The message repeated 3 times. For 40 seconds, nothing changed. Then the air intake tube dropped below the surface. The vessel was diving. Federal agents conduct a dawn raid silhouette sweep of a secondary location. SWAT team members clear rooms in tactical sequence. A handcuffed suspect is led past a waiting FBI Suburban. The net is tightening. A semi-submersible diving under pursuit is an interdiction team's worst case. The vessel loses its air intake, which means the diesel engine runs on reserve air. Maximum time, 8 to 12 minutes before the engine dies and the vessel either surfaces or fills. But 8 to 12 minutes is enough time to open the sea valves, enough time to sink the cargo. The FAST team leader made a call. Deploy divers immediately. 2 operators went into the water from the hovering helicopter, equipped with rebreather systems and hull attachment tools. Their job was to attach a GPS beacon to the hull before it went too deep. The vessel was at 18 feet when the first diver reached it. He attached the beacon to the stern, confirmed attachment by radio. At 1:41 a.m., the vessel's diesel engine stopped. The GPS beacon showed the hull stationary at 24 feet, drifting on current. At 08:49 a.m., the hull began rising. The vessel surfaced at 08:52 a.m. The deck hatch opened 40 seconds later. 8 crew members emerged, hands raised, and surrendered without resistance. Total time from first helicopter visual to crew surrender, 18 minutes. The FAST team secured the crew on deck and held position until USCGC Steadfast arrived at 10:07 a.m. Coast Guard boarding teams conducted the primary search. They found the cargo compartment sealed with a waterproof barrier, 340 vacuum-sealed bricks stacked in 20 rows of 17. Each brick weighed approximately 33 pounds. Total weight, 11,220 pounds, or approximately 11.2 tons. At the evidence collection scene, agents break open a sealed compartment and hold a sample bag up to the forensic photography light, the crystals catching white and clear. Purity analysis later conducted at the DEA Southwest Laboratory in San Diego returned an average of 96.3%, near pharmaceutical grade. Agents cataloged bag after bag moved under forensic photography lights. DEA Special Operations commanders on site put the wholesale cartel transfer value at approximately $56 million. Analysts at the dispatch center, cross-referencing distribution data on the surveillance monitor wall, estimated the U.S. retail equivalent between $180 million and $220 million, depending on cut rate and distribution level. The vessel was towed to Naval Base Point Loma. On July 11, 2026, the 340 bricks were offloaded and laid on the dock in a single line for FBI evidence intake documentation. The line stretched approximately 340 feet. Photographers from the DEA and FBI public affairs offices documented the seizure. The images were released July 14. The 8 crew members were transferred to federal custody in San Diego. They were identified as nationals of 3 different countries. Under standard interdiction protocols, they were charged in the Southern District of California with narcotics trafficking conspiracy and related offenses. Each faces a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years under federal statute, with maximums ranging to life depending on their roles. What nobody expected about the interrogation phase, 3 of the 8 crew members began cooperating within 48 hours. They weren't mid-level operators. They were maritime technicians. The engineer, the navigator, and the communications specialist. The people who built the capability, not the people who controlled it. Their cooperation gave the task force something more valuable than the cargo technical details.
How Ruta Azul had been running, how long, and who was managing it above the vessel level.
Here is the part that doesn't make sense on the surface. The Ruta Azul operation had been running since at least early 2024, according to the cooperating witnesses. Multiple transits, multiple vessels, not one. The seized semi-submersible was, by their account, the 3rd hull built for the route. The first 2 had completed their runs without interdiction. One was reportedly scuttled after a close call with a Navy patrol in December 2024.
If true, 11.2 tons seized on July 9th, 2026.
2 prior transits completed. The total volume that moved through this corridor before interdiction, unknown. The task force opened a parallel investigation the same day the cooperating witnesses began talking. The communications specialist provided the most operationally significant information. He had managed the satellite uplink system and knew the relay architecture. Burst transmissions went to a satellite-based relay, then to a ground station in a coastal region south of Ensenada. From there, transmissions were forwarded by encrypted messaging application to a logistics coordinator, referred to in communications only by a call sign. Tiburon. Shark. Tiburon was not on the vessel. Tiburon was on land. The DEA task force cross-referenced the communication patterns, transmission timing, and the geographic footprint of the relay station against existing intelligence holdings. What they found: Tiburon was almost certainly based in Mexico, coordinating multiple maritime operations, and had connections to at least 2 other DEA priority targets in the Ruta Azul network. Identifying Tiburon became the new primary objective. There is a line in the early case file that reads like a footnote but carries real weight. The vessel's communications architecture suggests access to technical expertise not typically available to cartel logistics cells, meaning whoever built the uplink system had knowledge of satellite monitoring patterns, gap timing, and encryption protocols that go beyond standard cartel technical capacity. The task force flagged this as unresolved. It remains unresolved. Here's the honest take. The seizure of the vessel and cargo, as successful as it was, represents a single interdiction event in an ongoing operation. The task force dismantled one hull. The logistics coordinator is unidentified. The technical expertise that built the communication system is still out there. Calling July 9 a decisive victory over Ruta Azul is premature. It was a successful interdiction. The network that built this vessel will build another. That's the honest assessment. The technical forensics on the seized vessel took 3 weeks. DEA, Coast Guard, and Navy technical teams worked through the hull, the engine compartment, the communications package, and the cargo space. What they documented fed an intelligence product circulated to JI Def South and AMI Arc N. Key findings: the hull had been built in a purpose-built facility, not an improvised dry dock. The fiberglass layup quality, the foam core construction, and the diesel installation indicated professional fabrication. The communications system used commercial components modified by someone with electronics engineering knowledge. The cargo compartment's waterproof barrier was a custom fabrication, not commercial packaging. Federal agents inside the vessel's interior document the sealed hold, the scrubbed exhaust port, the reinforced framing, each captured under forensic photography lights. This was not improvised, it was manufactured. What do you think? Is seizing one vessel enough, or does this operation end only when the network's technical infrastructure is dismantled? Comment below. Agents at the surveillance monitor wall maintain their watch. The radar tracking display shows the next window approaching. On the dock, evidence collection continues under forensic photography lights. The task force is still in position. The 8 crew members were arraigned in federal court in San Diego on July 12, 2026. All 8 pleaded not guilty. The 3 cooperating witnesses entered into proffer agreements. Their formal cooperation arrangements were pending resolution of their charges at the time of this report. The case was assigned to the Southern District of California's Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, OCDETF, under the designation Operation Pacific Threshold. Prosecutors from the DOJ's Narcotic and Dangerous Drug Section joined the case on July 15. The vessel itself preserved as evidence. The 340 bricks of methamphetamine transferred to DEA storage pending destruction after evidentiary processing. The GPS beacon deployed by the divers entered into evidence. The satellite uplink hardware forwarded to the DEA Technical Operations Group for further analysis. The towing operation had one complication that didn't make the official release. When USCGC Steadfast began the tow to Point Loma, semi-submersible's bilge pumps were still running, drawing down its battery reserve. 3 hours into the tow, the pumps failed. The hull began taking on water. The tow crew had to improvise. A Coast Guard damage control team was transferred to the hull mid-ocean to manually operate backup bilge equipment. For 4 hours, the tow continued with a 3-person crew on a half-submerged narco semi-submersible 200 miles from port. The hull made it. Every brick made it. One detail that stayed with us in reviewing this case: the crew's distress signals at Gear 82 and 09 AM went to a relay point on the Baja Peninsula that has not been identified. The shoreside infrastructure that supported Ruta Azul, the relay station, the logistics coordinator, the fabrication facility, the people who moved the product once it reached the California coast, none of it has been publicly confirmed as disrupted. The vessel is in federal custody. 8 men are in federal custody. 11.2 tons of methamphetamine is in federal custody. Tiburon is not.
The task force working the Ruta Azul network established from cooperating witness testimony that the operation had moved at least 2 prior shipments through the Pacific corridor before the July 9 interdiction. Volumes from those prior transits are unknown. The DEA and its partner agencies have not confirmed whether any of that product has been linked to specific distribution networks in the United States. What the cooperating witnesses could not provide, the identity of anyone above the logistics coordinator level. The cartel structure behind Ruta Azul was compartmented. The crew knew Tiburon. Tiburon presumably knew whoever was above him, but none of the 8 men on the vessel had ever interacted with anyone above the logistics layer. That was the point of the compartmentation. This is a pattern worth understanding.
Modern cartel logistics operations deliberately limit the information available to any single cell. The crew knew the route, the cargo, and a call sign. They did not know where the cargo was going after delivery. They did not know who financed the vessel's construction. They did not know how many other vessels were operating on parallel routes. The most surprising element of this case is not the size of the seizure or the sophistication of the vessel. It's how little the seizure tells us about the network that built it. 11.2 tons interdicted. 0 arrests above the crew level. The case file, for all its tactical success, stops at the waterline. Whether the investigation advances beyond the crew level depends on what the technical forensics on the communications hardware reveals, what the cooperating witnesses provide in formal debriefs, and whether the relay station near Ensenada can be identified and monitored. Agents at the surveillance monitor wall keep running the data. The radar tracking display cycles through active contacts. On the dock, the handcuffed suspect is walked to a waiting federal vehicle. The task force holds its positions and keeps watching. The DEA's Special Operations Division and its partner agencies, Coast Guard, CBP Air and Marine Operations, and the Navy's Patrol Aircraft Detachment at Corpus Christi, will continue operating in the Pacific Corridor. N has the corridor flagged. The timing cycle is documented. If Ruta Azul attempts another transit with a 4th vessel, the task force will be looking. Will they be looking in the right place? Comment yes or no below. What came out of July 9, 2026 is a picture of capability on both sides. A cartel network that spent $1.2 million on a single vessel, built sophisticated communications infrastructure, and ran 2 prior transits undetected. Against it, 9 months of intelligence work, a degraded radar system that still found its target, a dive team deployment in open ocean, and a tow crew that kept a sinking hull afloat for 4 hours to preserve the evidence chain. The 340 bricks are in federal custody. The vessel is dockside at Point Loma. Tiburon's call sign is in the case file. Tiburon is not. Forensic photography teams document every weld seam and panel joint recovered from the vessel. FBI tactical analysts reviewing the evidence collection scene note the construction precision. The fabrication facility that produced this hull, and at least 2 others confirmed by DEA Special Operations, has not been located. The search is ongoing. The technical expertise behind the communication system has not been attributed. Operation Pacific Threshold is active. The network it targeted, status unknown. If you want to see what happened when a similar network tried to route product through the Gulf Corridor and hit a different kind of trap, subscribe. That one involves 19 months of undercover work and a federal informant who disappeared 72 hours before the takedown. The demand that made Ruta Azul profitable still exists. The corridor still exists. The only thing that changed on July 9 is that 1 hull, 1 crew, and 11.2 tons of methamphetamine are no longer in the Pacific. On the surveillance monitor wall, active contacts still populate the radar tracking display. DEA Special Operations units maintain international waters patrol. The evidence collection scene on the dock represents 1 vessel, 1 crew, 1 load. The screen shows more.